Public Storage's Haunted Halls. Why renters are hearing more than just echoes. Chapter 1. The new location. The sun had barely risen over New York City when the large, gleaming sign was unveiled. Public Storage Inc. Girard Avenue location now open. The early morning light reflected off the polished metal and glass structure, making it stand out amidst the older, more worn buildings of the neighborhood. A small crowd had gathered, drawn by the promise of promotional rates and the allure of a brand new facility. Among them was Ross, a tall, lean figure with deep-set eyes that always seemed to be searching for something just out of reach. Today marked his first day working at the Girard Avenue location, and while he should have been excited, a nagging feeling of unease settled in the pit of his stomach. As the ribbon was cut and the first customers began to stream in, a local historian took the opportunity to remind those present of the site's storied past. This very ground, he began, his voice carrying a note of solemnity, was once sacred to the indigenous tribes of this area. It's said that tribal warriors were laid to rest here. His words were largely ignored, drowned out by the buzz of excitement and the promise of modernity. The historian, looking somewhat deflated, simply shook his head and walked away. Inside, Ross manned the front desk, greeting customers and explaining the terms of their contracts. The facility was indeed state-of-the-art, with climate-controlled units, round-the-clock security, and a sophisticated surveillance system. The initial renters were impressed, and many commented on the pristine condition of the place and the sense of safety they felt. However, as the day wore on, Ross couldn't shake off the historian's words. Every so often, he'd glance towards the storage units, half expecting to see something out of place. And as the shadows grew longer and the light began to wane, that's precisely what began to happen. It started subtly. A light would flicker intermittently in a hallway. A cold draft would sweep through a room with no windows. But then, as Ross was helping a customer, he heard it, a faint whisper, like a breeze carrying a secret. He paused, straining his ears, but the sound was gone as quickly as it had come. The customer, a middle-aged woman with a cart full of boxes, looked at him quizzically. "Is everything all right?" she asked. Ross forced a smile. "Of course, just thought I heard something. This place is brand new, so there might be a few kinks to work out." The woman nodded, but as she walked away, Ross noticed her casting a wary glance over her shoulder. The strange occurrences didn't stop there. As the evening approached, more renters reported odd happenings. One man claimed that his storage unit's door had slammed shut on its own, while another swore she'd seen a shadowy figure darting between the rows of units. Ross tried to remain rational, attributing the incidents to overactive imaginations or the building settling. But when he went to check the surveillance footage, he was in for a shock. The cameras had captured clear images of lights turning on and off by themselves, doors opening and closing with no one in sight, and, most disturbingly, ethereal figures that seemed to float through the walls. He sat back in his chair, his heart racing. The historian's words echoed in his mind. Had they truly built this facility on sacred ground? And if so, what had they awakened? As Ross pondered these questions, the whispers returned, this time louder and more insistent. They seemed to be coming from all directions, surrounding him. He stood up, his eyes darting around the room, trying to locate the source of the sounds. And then, as suddenly as they had begun, the whispers stopped. The room was plunged into silence, save for the distant hum of the city outside. But Ross knew that this was just the beginning. Whatever spirits inhabited this place, they were restless, and they were trying to communicate. With a newfound sense of purpose, Ross decided that he would get to the bottom of this mystery. He would uncover the history of the site, learn about the tribal warriors who were said to be buried there, and find a way to appease the spirits. It was clear that this was no ordinary storage facility, and Ross was about to embark on an adventure unlike any he had ever imagined. Chapter 2. The first incident. The next morning, the Girard Avenue location was abuzz with activity. Renters were coming in and out, moving their belongings into their respective units. Ross, still shaken from the previous evening's events, tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy. He greeted each customer with a smile, though his eyes constantly darted towards the surveillance monitors, half expecting to see something amiss. It wasn't long before his fears were realized. A distressed woman, in her early 30s with raven black hair, approached the front desk. "Excuse me," she began, her voice trembling. "I think someone's been in my unit." Ross looked up, concern evident on his face. "What makes you say that?" She hesitated for a moment, as if questioning her own sanity. "My things, they've been moved around. I had everything organized just so, and now it's all different." Ross frowned. "That's impossible. Our security system is top-notch. No one could have accessed your unit without a key." Determined to get to the bottom of this, he pulled up the CCTV footage of the woman's unit. The two of them watched intently, scanning for any signs of a break-in. Hours of footage played, showing the unit's door remaining firmly shut. But then, something caught Ross's eye. Shadowy figures, barely visible, flitted across the screen. They seemed to move with purpose, rearranging the items inside the unit before vanishing as mysteriously as they had appeared. The woman gasped, her face pale. "What? What are those?" Ross swallowed hard, struggling to find the words. I'm not sure. But I promise you, we'll get to the bottom of this." Word of the incident spread like wildfire. By midday, whispers of the facility being haunted were on everyone's lips. Some renters, spooked by the rumors, began to empty their units, while others watched the CCTV footage in morbid fascination, searching for any signs of the supernatural. Ross felt a growing sense of unease. He had hoped that the previous night's events were a one-off, but now it was clear that the spirits were growing bolder. He decided to stay late, hoping to catch a glimpse of the apparitions and perhaps communicate with them. As night fell, the facility took on an eerie quality. The once bright hallways were now dimly lit, casting long shadows that seemed to dance and flicker with a life of their own. Ross made his way to the unit where the incident had occurred, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He stood outside the door, taking a deep breath to steady himself. Then, slowly, he turned the handle and stepped inside. The room was cold, much colder than it should have been. Ross could see his breath forming little clouds in the air. He looked around, trying to spot any signs of the spirits. But the room was empty, save for the woman's belongings, which were now neatly arranged. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing the lone light bulb overhead. Ross was plunged into darkness, his heart racing. He fumbled for his flashlight, but before he could turn it on, he felt a presence beside him. A soft voice, barely above a whisper, spoke into his ear. "Why have you come here?" Ross, though terrified, managed to find his voice. "I want to help. I want to understand." The spirit, for that's what Ross assumed it was, seemed to consider this for a moment. Then, it spoke again, its voice filled with sadness. "We are trapped, bound to this place by the weight of our past. We cannot move on until our story is told." Ross nodded, though he wasn't sure the spirit could see him. "What is your story? How can I help?" The spirit hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "Betrayal," it began, its voice filled with pain. "We were betrayed by our own, left to perish in this forsaken place. Our souls cry out for justice, for recognition." Ross felt a pang of sympathy. "I promise, I'll do everything I can to help you find peace." The spirit seemed to sigh, a sound that sent shivers down Ross's spine. "Beware," it warned. "Not all of us are as benevolent as I. Some are filled with rage, seeking revenge for the wrongs done to them." With that, the spirit vanished, leaving Ross alone in the darkness. He quickly turned on his flashlight, his hands shaking. The weight of what he had just experienced pressed down on him, but he was determined to see this through. As he made his way out of the unit, Ross knew that he was in for the fight of his life. The spirits were restless, and it was up to him to help them find peace. But with the malevolent entities lurking in the shadows, he knew that the path ahead would be fraught with danger. Chapter 3. Delving into the past, the morning sun streamed through the windows of the New York Public Library as Ross settled into a secluded corner, surrounded by stacks of old newspapers, city records, and historical documents. The encounter with the spirit had left him with more questions than answers, and he was determined to uncover the truth about the Girard Avenue location. Hours turned into days as Ross meticulously combed through the records. He learned that the area had once been a thriving hub for the indigenous tribes of the region. As he delved deeper, a particular piece of information caught his eye, a century-old newspaper article detailing the discovery of an ancient burial ground during the construction of a building on Girard Avenue. The article described the outrage of the local tribes as their ancestors' resting place was desecrated. Protests were held, but the construction company, eager to capitalize on the prime real estate, proceeded with their plans, relocating the remains to a distant cemetery and building over the sacred site. Ross felt a chill run down his spine. The pieces were falling into place. The public storage facility had been built on sacred tribal warrior burial grounds. The spirits he had encountered were those of the warriors, their unrest fueled by the desecration of their final resting place. Feeling the weight of this revelation, Ross decided to confide in someone. He thought of Maya, a coworker who had been with public storage for years. She was known for her pragmatic approach to things, and Ross hoped she might offer a fresh perspective. Over coffee, Ross recounted his findings and experiences to Maya. She listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. When he finished, she took a moment before responding. "I've heard rumors," she began, whispers among the older employees about strange happenings at the Girard Avenue location. "But I always dismissed them as urban legends." She paused, looking thoughtful. "But after what you've told me, I'm not so sure." Ross nodded, grateful for her open-mindedness. "There's more," he said, pulling out a map of the facility he had obtained from the management office. "I've marked the units where the most activity has been reported. I think we should check them out." Maya agreed, and the two set out for the Girard Avenue location. As they walked through the facility, Ross could feel the energy shift, growing more intense as they approached the marked units. They began with a unit that had been rented out but was currently vacant. Inside, it looked like any other storage unit, filled with boxes and furniture. But as Ross and Maya moved deeper into the unit, they stumbled upon something unexpected, a wooden chest, ornately decorated with tribal symbols. Carefully, they opened the chest to reveal a collection of old tribal artifacts, ceremonial masks, feathered headdresses, and intricately carved talismans. Ross felt a surge of energy as he touched one of the talismans, a connection to the spirits that inhabited the facility. As they examined the artifacts, the atmosphere in the unit grew heavy. The temperature dropped, and a dense fog began to fill the room. Ross and Maya exchanged worried glances, realizing that their discovery had not gone unnoticed. Whispers filled the air, growing louder and more insistent. Shadowy figures materialized around them, their forms flickering like flames. Ross recognized one of the spirits, the benevolent one he had encountered earlier. "We are the guardians of these artifacts," the spirit intoned, its voice echoing through the unit. "They are a link to our past, a reminder of our legacy." Ross nodded, understanding the significance of their discovery. "We will ensure they are treated with the respect they deserve," he promised. The spirit seemed to consider this for a moment before nodding in agreement. "But beware," it warned, "for not all of us are as forgiving. The desecration of our burial grounds has awakened a rage in some that cannot be quelled." With that, the spirits vanished, leaving Ross and Maya alone in the unit. They carefully packed up the artifacts, vowing to find a way to return them to their rightful place. As they left the facility, the weight of their mission pressing down on them, Ross and Maya knew that they were in for a long and challenging journey. The spirits were restless, and it was up to them to help them find peace. But with the malevolent entities lurking in the shadows, they knew that the path ahead would be fraught with danger. Chapter 4. The Paranormal Team. The news of the strange occurrences at the Girard Avenue location of public storage spread like wildfire. The management, concerned about the facility's reputation and the safety of its renters, decided to take action. They hired Spectral Solutions, a renowned paranormal investigation team, to get to the bottom of the disturbances. The team arrived on a chilly evening, their van loaded with an array of high-tech equipment. Ross and Maya watched from a distance as the team set up infrared cameras, motion detectors, and audio recording devices throughout the facility. The lead investigator, a tall woman with sharp features named Elise, approached Ross. "We've heard a lot about this place," she said, her eyes scanning the facility. "We're here to find out what's really going on." As night fell, the investigation began in earnest. The team split up, with each member assigned to a specific area of the facility. Ross and Maya accompanied Elise and her assistant, a young man named Jake, as they ventured into the unit where the tribal artifacts had been discovered. Almost immediately, the team began experiencing equipment malfunctions. Cameras refused to record, batteries drained at an alarming rate, and the temperature fluctuated wildly. Jake, trying to capture an EVP, frowned as his recorder emitted a high-pitched whine. Elise, ever the professional, remained calm. "It's not uncommon for spirits to interfere with electronic equipment," she explained. "They're trying to communicate in any way they can." As the night wore on, the team captured a series of chilling EVPs. Among the static and white noise, the faint sounds of tribal chants could be heard. The voices, though distant, were filled with pain and anger. Ross, listening to the playback, felt a shiver run down his spine. "They're trying to tell us something," he murmured. Elise nodded in agreement. "We need to find out what happened here, to understand why these spirits are so restless." As the team continued their investigation, Elise decided to conduct a spirit box session in the heart of the facility. The spirit box, a device that scans radio frequencies at high speed, is believed to allow spirits to communicate in real time. As the static-filled voice of the spirit box filled the room, Elise began asking questions. "Who are you?" she inquired. "Why are you here?" For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a voice, clear and unmistakable, responded, "Betrayed." Elise, taken aback, pressed on. "Who betrayed you?" The response was a series of chilling tribal chants, growing louder and more insistent. The atmosphere in the room grew heavy, and a dense fog began to fill the space. Suddenly, Elise gasped, her eyes rolling back in her head. She began to convulse, her body shaking uncontrollably. Jake rushed to her side, trying to steady her, but she seemed to be in the throes of a powerful vision. Ross and Maya watched in horror as Elise relived the past. She saw the tribal warriors, proud and strong, defending their land against invaders. She witnessed their betrayal by their own people, their sacred burial grounds desecrated and built upon. She felt their pain, their anger, their desire for justice. As quickly as it had begun, the vision ended. Elise collapsed, exhausted and shaken. Jake, concern evident on his face, helped her to her feet. "We need to leave," Elise whispered, her voice hoarse. "This place, it's too powerful. We're not equipped to handle this." The team quickly packed up their equipment, their earlier confidence replaced by fear. As they left the facility, Ross and Maya exchanged worried glances. The spirits were growing more restless, and it was clear that the path to peace would be fraught with danger. As the van pulled away, The haunting tribal chants echoed through the night, a chilling reminder of the past and the restless spirits that remained. Chapter 5. Maya's encounter. The days following the paranormal team's abrupt departure were tense. The atmosphere at the Girard Avenue location was thick with anticipation, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Renters came and went with a sense of urgency, their conversations hushed and their glances furtive. Maya, despite the mounting evidence, still held onto her skepticism. She believed there had to be a logical explanation for everything they had experienced. But all that was about to change. Late one evening, after most of the renters had left, Maya decided to do a routine check of the units. She moved methodically from one to the next, ensuring that all was in order. As she approached one of the older units, she noticed that the door was slightly ajar. Thinking it was just a careless renter, she stepped inside to secure it. The moment she entered, the door slammed shut behind her, plunging the unit into darkness. Maya, taken aback, reached for the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Panic began to set in as she realized she was trapped. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she saw them, shadowy figures, their forms flickering like flames, moving towards her. Their faces were obscured, but their intent was clear. They were angry, and Maya was in their domain. She backed up against the wall, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The figures closed in, their whispers growing louder and more insistent. Maya closed her eyes, bracing herself for the worst. Meanwhile, Ross, who was in the main office, felt a sudden surge of unease. It was as if a cold hand had gripped his heart. He knew, instinctively, that Maya was in danger. Without a second thought, he raced towards the units, following the pull of his intuition. He found Maya's flashlight on the ground outside the unit she had entered. The door was locked, but he could hear her muffled cries for help. With a surge of adrenaline, he threw his weight against the door, breaking it open. The sight that met his eyes was like something out of a nightmare. Maya was surrounded by apparitions, their faces twisted in rage. But as Ross stepped into the unit, they paused, turning their attention to him. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, without warning, Ross and Maya were pulled into a shared vision. They found themselves in the midst of a tribal ceremony, the air thick with the scent of burning sage and the sound of drums. They watched as the tribal warriors, their faces painted with intricate designs, danced around a roaring fire. The energy was palpable, a celebration of life and death, of battles won and lost. As the ceremony reached its climax, the chief, a tall, imposing figure, stepped forward. He raised his arms to the sky, chanting a prayer to the ancestors. Ross and Maya, though mere spectators in this vision, felt a deep connection to the tribe. They understood, on a visceral level, the pain and betrayal the spirits had felt, their sacred burial grounds desecrated and built upon. As the vision faded, Ross and Maya found themselves back in the storage unit, the apparitions gone. They looked at each other, a shared understanding passing between them. Maya, her skepticism shattered, whispered, "I believe." Ross nodded, his resolve strengthened. "We need to find a way to help them, to give them the peace they deserve." Maya, her eyes filled with determination, replied, "I'm with you, every step of the way." And so, united in their quest for answers, Ross and Maya set out to uncover the truth, to right the wrongs of the past, and to bring peace to the restless spirits of the Girard Avenue location. Chapter 6. The tribal elder. The sun was just beginning to set as Ross and Maya made their way to the outskirts of the city. They were headed to the reservation where Ross's family had lived for generations. Tucked away amidst the sprawling urban landscape, the reservation was a haven of tradition and culture, a place where the old ways were still honored and practiced. Their destination was the home of Nkosi, a respected tribal elder and a direct descendant of the warriors whose spirits now haunted the Girard Avenue location. Ross had grown up listening to Nkosi's stories, tales of bravery and sacrifice, of love and betrayal. He hoped that the elder would have the answers they sought. Nokosi's home was a modest wooden cabin, its walls adorned with tribal symbols and artifacts. As they approached, the door swung open to reveal the elder himself, his weathered face breaking into a smile at the sight of Ross. "Ah, young one," he greeted, his voice deep and resonant. "I have been expecting you." Ross bowed his head in respect. "Nokosi, we need your guidance. The spirits of our ancestors are restless, and we seek a way to bring them peace." Nokosi nodded, beckoning them inside. The interior of the cabin was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of burning sage. They sat around a low table, the elder pouring a fragrant herbal tea into wooden cups. As they sipped the tea, Nokosi began to speak. "The warriors you speak of were the pride of our tribe. Brave and fierce, they defended our lands against invaders, ensuring our safety and prosperity. But, as is often the case, they were betrayed by one of their own." Ross and Maya listened intently as Nokosi recounted the tragic tale. A young warrior, consumed by jealousy and greed, had made a deal with the invaders, leading them to the tribe's sacred burial grounds in exchange for wealth and power. The warriors, caught off guard, were slaughtered, their spirits forever bound to the land they had sworn to protect. "The spirits you have encountered are those of the warriors," Nokosi continued. "Their unrest is fueled by the desecration of their final resting place. But there is a way to appease them, to help them find peace." Ross leaned forward, hope shining in his eyes. "What must we do?" Nokosi reached into a wooden chest, pulling out an intricately carved talisman. "This is the key," he explained. "It is a conduit, a way for the living to communicate with the spirits. With it, you can perform a ritual to release the warriors, allowing them to move on to the next world." Maya, her curiosity piqued, asked, "What does the ritual entail?" Nokosi's expression grew serious. "It is not to be taken lightly. The ritual requires a deep connection to the spirits, a willingness to open oneself up to their energy. There are risks, especially given the presence of a malevolent spirit among the warriors." Ross frowned. "A malevolent spirit?" Nokosi nodded gravely. "The young warrior who betrayed the tribe. His spirit is filled with rage and guilt, a dangerous combination. He will do everything in his power to stop the ritual, to ensure that the warriors remain bound to the land." Ross and Maya exchanged worried glances. The stakes were higher than they had realized. But they were determined to see this through, to bring peace to the restless spirits. "We will do whatever it takes," Ross vowed. Nokosi smiled, placing a reassuring hand on Ross's shoulder. "I have faith in you, young one. With the right guidance and preparation, you can succeed." And so, with Nokosi's guidance, Ross and Maya began their preparations. They gathered the necessary materials, studying the intricacies of the ritual. They practiced their chants, their movements, ensuring that everything was perfect. As the night of the ritual approached, the atmosphere at the Girard Avenue location grew even more tense. The spirits were restless, their energy palpable. But Ross and Maya were ready. With Nokosi's teachings fresh in their minds, they set out to appease the spirits, to bring an end to the haunting of the Girard Avenue location. Chapter 7. Preparations. The days leading up to the ritual were a whirlwind of activity. Ross and Maya, under Nokosi's guidance, worked tirelessly to ensure that everything was in place. The elder had provided them with a list of items they would need: sacred talismans, specific herbs known for their spiritual properties, and ancient chants that would serve as a bridge between the living and the spirit world. The first task was to gather the talismans. Nokosi had entrusted Ross with the main talisman, the intricately carved conduit he had shown them. But they would also need additional talismans to create a protective circle during the ritual. These were scattered throughout the reservation, each one guarded by a member of the tribe. Ross, with his deep connection to the spirits, was able to locate each talisman with relative ease, his intuition guiding him. Next came the herbs. Some, like sage and cedar, were readily available on the reservation. Others, like the rare moonflower, required a journey to the heart of the forest. Maya took the lead on this task, her knowledge of plants and their properties proving invaluable. With Nokosi's teachings in mind, she carefully harvested each herb, ensuring that they were taken with respect and gratitude. As they gathered the necessary items, Ross underwent a purification ceremony. Nokosi explained that in order to communicate with the spirits, Ross would need to be free of any negative energy. The ceremony took place at a sacred spring on the reservation, its waters known for their healing properties. Ross, stripped of his clothing, was submerged in the spring, the cold water taking his breath away. As Nokosi chanted, Ross felt a weight lifting off him, his mind and body cleansed. Meanwhile, Maya made a startling discovery. While checking her own storage unit at the Girard Avenue location, she stumbled upon an old diary. The leather-bound book was dusty and worn, its pages yellowed with age. Curious, Maya began to read, her eyes widening as she realized the diary's significance. It belonged to a member of the tribe, a shaman who had performed rituals similar to the one they were planning. The diary detailed each ritual, providing invaluable insight into the process. As the day of the ritual approached, Ross began to experience visions. The spirits, sensing his intent, were reaching out to him, guiding him. He saw the tribal warriors, their faces painted with intricate designs, dancing around a roaring fire. He heard their chants, felt their energy. But among them was a darker presence, the malevolent spirit of the young warrior who had betrayed the tribe. This spirit, filled with rage and guilt, sent Ross visions of destruction, of the ritual going horribly wrong. Despite the malevolent spirit's attempts to sabotage their efforts, Ross and Maya pressed on. With Nokosi's guidance and the information from the diary, they felt confident in their ability to appease the spirits. They spent the days leading up to the ritual practicing their chants, rehearsing their movements, ensuring that everything was perfect. As the sun set on the eve of the ritual, Ross and Maya stood outside the Girard Avenue location, the weight of their mission pressing down on them. They knew that the path ahead would be fraught with danger, but they were determined to see it through, to bring peace to the restless spirits of the tribal warriors. Chapter 8. The ritual. The clock struck midnight, its chimes echoing through the silent streets surrounding the Girard Avenue public storage facility. The moon, full and radiant, cast a silvery glow over the area, its light juxtaposed with the shadows that seemed to dance and flicker with a life of their own. Ross and Maya, standing at the entrance of the facility, took a deep breath. The time had come. With the talismans, herbs, and chants at the ready, they began the ritual. Maya lit a bundle of sage, its smoke spiraling upwards, purifying the air. Ross, holding the main talisman tightly in his hand, began to chant, his voice deep and resonant. The words, passed down through generations, held the power to bridge the gap between the living and the spirit world. As they delved deeper into the ritual, a thick fog began to envelop the facility. It rolled in slowly, steadily, until the entire area was shrouded in a dense, white mist. The world outside seemed to fade away, leaving Ross and Maya in a realm that was neither here nor there. From within the fog, figures began to emerge. The spirits of the tribal warriors, their forms flickering like flames, appeared, forming a circle around Ross and Maya. They watched in silence, their expressions inscrutable, as the ritual continued. But among them was a darker presence. The malevolent spirit of the young warrior who had betrayed the tribe stepped forward, his form more solid, more real, than the others. His eyes, filled with rage and guilt, locked onto Ross. "You dare to appease us?" he hissed, his voice dripping with malice. "You who know nothing of our pain, our sacrifice. Ross, undeterred, met the spirit's gaze. "I am of your blood," he replied, his voice steady. "I seek to right the wrongs of the past, to bring you the peace you deserve." The malevolent spirit laughed, a sound that sent chills down Maya's spine. "You think you have the power to release us? To challenge me?" With that, he lunged at Ross, his form becoming more tangible, more threatening. Ross, drawing on the power of the talisman and the strength of his ancestors, stood his ground. A battle of wills ensued, the air crackling with energy. The spirits of the tribal warriors, sensing the danger, rallied around Ross, their chants joining his, amplifying the power of the ritual. The facility seemed to come alive, the walls vibrating, the ground shaking. Maya, her voice joining the chorus, threw the herbs into a fire they had prepared, the flames leaping up, their colors shifting from orange to blue to green. The smoke, thick and fragrant, swirled around the malevolent spirit, weakening him. Ross, seizing the opportunity, channeled the power of his ancestors, directing it at the spirit. "Be gone!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the facility. "Return to the darkness from whence you came." With a final, deafening scream, the malevolent spirit was banished, his form dissipating into the fog. The tribal warriors, their spirits finally at peace, began to fade as well, their forms becoming one with the mist. As the fog lifted, the world outside came into focus once more. The facility, once a place of unrest, was now calm, the air filled with a sense of tranquility. Ross and Maya, exhausted but elated, looked at each other, a shared sense of accomplishment passing between them. They had done it. They had appeased the spirits, bringing peace to the Girard Avenue location. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, they left the facility, their hearts light, knowing that they had made a difference, that they had righted the wrongs of the past. Chapter 9. The spirit's tale. The sun had barely risen, casting a soft golden hue over the city. The events of the night still weighed heavily on Ross and Maya's minds. They had managed to appease the spirits, but the malevolent spirit's sudden appearance and subsequent banishment left them with more questions than answers. As they sat in a nearby cafe, sipping on hot coffee, Ross's expression turned contemplative. "There's more to that spirit than meets the eye," he mused. His anger, his pain, it felt personal. Maya nodded in agreement. He mentioned being betrayed. "I wonder." ... Before she could finish her thought, a cold gust of wind blew through the cafe, extinguishing the candles on the tables. The patrons murmured in surprise, but for Ross and Maya, it was a sign. The malevolent spirit was reaching out. Closing his eyes, Ross focused on the spirit's energy, allowing it to envelop him. Images flashed before his eyes: a vibrant tribal community, celebrations, battles, and finally, a heartbreaking betrayal. The spirit had once been a tribal leader, revered and respected by all. But his position had made him a target. Jealousy and greed had taken root in the hearts of some of his closest allies. They had conspired against him, leading to his downfall. His death had been brutal, his spirit forever bound to the sacred burial grounds, his anger and pain keeping the other spirits trapped with him. As the vision faded, Ross opened his eyes, tears streaming down his face. He had felt the spirit's pain, his sense of betrayal. He was betrayed by his own, he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. His anger, his need for revenge, has kept the other spirits bound to the location. Maya, her heart heavy, reached out to comfort Ross. "We need to help him," she said. "We need to find a way to bring him peace." Ross nodded, determination burning in his eyes. "He deserves a chance at redemption. We need to right the wrongs of the past." And so, with a new mission in mind, Ross and Maya set out to uncover the truth behind the spirit's betrayal. They delved into the history of the tribe, seeking out any records or accounts of the events that had led to the tribal leader's downfall. Their search led them to the reservation's archives, where they discovered an old manuscript detailing the tribe's history. As they read, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The tribal leader had been betrayed by his closest advisors, who had been seduced by promises of wealth and power from rival tribes. With this newfound knowledge, Ross reached out to the spirit once more, offering him a chance at redemption. "We know the truth," he said. "We know what happened to you. Let us help you find peace." The spirit, his anger replaced by a deep sense of sadness, agreed. "Release the others," Ross implored. "Let them move on. And in return, we will help you find the peace you so desperately seek." The spirit nodded, his form fading away, leaving Ross and Maya with a sense of purpose. They knew what they had to do. They had to right the past wrongs, to bring justice to those who had betrayed the tribal leader. And so, with the spirit's tale weighing heavily on their hearts, Ross and Maya embarked on a new mission, determined to bring peace to the restless spirits of the Girard Avenue location. Chapter 10. Unearthing the Truth. The city's historical archives, a grand old building with towering shelves and dusty tomes, became the primary destination for Ross and Maya. They spent days poring over ancient manuscripts, tribal records, and personal diaries, searching for any clue that would shed light on the tribal leader's tragic tale. One evening, as the sun's last rays filtered through the stained glass windows, Maya stumbled upon a tattered journal. The leather-bound book, its pages yellowed with age, bore the emblem of the tribe. As she leafed through it, her eyes widened in realization. The journal belonged to one of the tribal leader's advisors, and it detailed the events leading up to the betrayal. The journal painted a vivid picture. The tribal leader, named Topical, was a visionary, striving for peace and unity among neighboring tribes. However, his efforts were seen as a threat by some of his advisors, who believed that aligning with rival tribes would bring them wealth and power. Seduced by these promises, they conspired against Topical, orchestrating a coup that led to his brutal demise. The weight of their treachery was evident in the journal's later entries, where the advisor expressed deep remorse and guilt. He wrote of nightmares, of Topical's spirit haunting him, seeking justice. With this newfound knowledge, Ross and Maya knew they had to act. They needed to locate the descendants of those involved in the betrayal and facilitate a reconciliation ceremony. It was the only way to bring peace to Topical's restless spirit. Using the names mentioned in the journal, they began their search. It wasn't easy, but their determination paid off. One by one, they located the descendants, each living their lives, unaware of their ancestors' dark past. The task of convincing them to participate in the reconciliation ceremony was challenging. Many were skeptical, some even hostile. But Ross, with his deep connection to the spirits and his genuine desire to right the wrongs of the past, managed to persuade them. The ceremony was held at the Girard Avenue Public Storage Facility, the very epicenter of the spiritual unrest. NYC, the tribal elder, presided over it, with Ross and Maya assisting. The descendants, standing in a circle, were each handed a talisman, symbolizing their connection to the past. As NYC began to chant, the atmosphere grew thick with tension. The air shimmered, and the spirits of the tribal warriors appeared, their forms flickering like flames. Among them was Topical, his gaze fixed on the descendants. One by one, the descendants stepped forward, expressing their remorse, acknowledging the pain and suffering caused by their ancestors. Tears flowed freely, both from the living and the spirits, as centuries of pain and betrayal were laid bare. The climax of the ceremony came when Topical's spirit approached the descendant of the advisor who had penned the journal. The two locked eyes, a silent exchange passing between them. Then, in a gesture of forgiveness, Topical reached out, touching the descendant's forehead with his ethereal hand. With that, a sense of peace and tranquility descended upon the facility. Topical, his spirit finally at rest, joined his fellow warriors. Together, they departed, their forms fading away, leaving the facility in peace. The descendants, their hearts lightened by the knowledge that they had played a part in righting the wrongs of the past, expressed their gratitude to Ross and Maya. The two, exhausted but elated, knew that their mission was complete. As they left the facility, hand in hand, the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon. A new day had dawned, bringing with it the promise of a brighter, more peaceful future. Chapter 11. Aftermath. News of the reconciliation ceremony at Public Storage's Girard Avenue location spread like wildfire. The story, with its blend of history, betrayal, and redemption, captured the imagination of the public. Soon, the facility became a hotspot for paranormal enthusiasts, history buffs, and those simply curious about the events that had transpired. The company's higher-ups took note of the surge in interest. Recognizing Ross's pivotal role in resolving the spiritual unrest and seeing the potential for the location to become a unique attraction, they promoted him to the position of manager. Maya, with her unwavering support and invaluable contributions, was appointed as his assistant. Together, they transformed the facility. The once sterile storage units were adorned with tribal art, photographs, and artifacts, turning them into mini museums that told the story of the tribal warriors and their tragic end. Plaques detailing the history of the location, the spirits that haunted it, and the reconciliation ceremony were placed throughout the facility, providing visitors with a comprehensive understanding of the events that had taken place. Ross and Maya also began offering guided tours. These tours, led by Ross, took visitors on a journey through the facility, recounting the haunted history, sharing personal experiences, and emphasizing the importance of understanding and reconciliation. Maya, with her knowledge of plants and their spiritual properties, set up a small herb garden on the facility's grounds, where she conducted workshops on traditional tribal medicine and rituals. The tours became incredibly popular, drawing visitors from all over the country. The once feared location, with its dark history and restless spirits, had been transformed into a symbol of reconciliation and understanding. It stood as a testament to the power of forgiveness, of the ability to move past pain and betrayal and find peace. But for Ross and Maya, their journey was far from over. Word of their success at the Girard Avenue location spread, and soon, they were being approached by owners of other haunted locations, seeking their help in resolving spiritual unrest. With Nokosi's guidance and the knowledge they had gained, they embarked on a new mission, to bring peace to restless spirits across the country. Each location presented its own set of challenges, its own unique history. But Ross and Maya, with their deep connection to the spirit world and their genuine desire to right the wrongs of the past, were up to the task. From abandoned asylums to historic mansions, they traveled the country, uncovering dark secrets, facilitating reconciliation ceremonies, and bringing peace to both the living and the dead. As they journeyed, their bond grew stronger. They became more than just colleagues. They were partners, united in their mission. Their adventures, filled with danger, mystery, and moments of profound emotion, brought them closer together, forging a bond that was unbreakable. And so, with each location they visited, with each spirit they helped find peace, Ross and Maya's legend grew. They became known as the peacekeepers of the paranormal, their story inspiring countless others to seek understanding, to bridge the gap between the living and the spirit world, and to find peace in their own lives. Chapter 12. A new beginning. The sun cast a warm, golden hue over the city skyline as Ross and Maya stood outside a quaint brick building in the heart of New York. The sign above the entrance read, Spiritual Harmony Consultancy, bridging the gap between the living and the departed. Their journey at the Girard Avenue public storage facility had not only transformed the location but had also profoundly changed them. Recognizing the need for their unique skills and the countless restless spirits seeking solace, they decided to establish their own paranormal consultancy. Their mission was clear: to aid troubled spirits, helping them find peace and resolution. Inside, The consultancy was a blend of modern design and tribal artifacts. The walls were adorned with photographs of the various locations they had visited, each telling a story of redemption and reconciliation. A cozy sitting area, complete with plush sofas and a fireplace, provided a comforting space for clients to share their experiences and concerns. Ross's office was a testament to his deep connection to the spirit world. Tribal masks, talismans, and sacred herbs lined the shelves, each with its own story, its own purpose. Maya's space, adjacent to Ross's, was filled with plants, books on traditional tribal medicine, and a workstation where she crafted herbal remedies and talismans. Their consultancy quickly gained a reputation for its unique approach and successful resolutions. Clients, ranging from homeowners to business owners, sought their expertise in dealing with paranormal disturbances. Ross and Maya, with their combined skills and deep understanding of the spirit world, provided guidance, conducted investigations, and facilitated reconciliation ceremonies. Public Storage Inc., recognizing the importance of acknowledging the history of their locations, took proactive measures to ensure no further disturbances. They collaborated with local historians and tribal communities, ensuring that any new facilities were built with respect and understanding. The company also established a scholarship fund for indigenous students, further strengthening their ties with the tribal communities. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Ross and Maya's consultancy flourished. Their success stories were featured in newspapers, magazines, and even television shows, further solidifying their reputation as the foremost experts in paranormal reconciliation. One evening, as they were wrapping up for the day, the phone rang. Maya picked it up, her expression turning serious as she listened to the caller. "Ross," she said, her voice tinged with excitement, "we've got a new case." Ross, looking up from his desk, raised an eyebrow inquisitively. "Where?" "A historic mansion in Virginia," Maya replied. "The owner says it's been haunted for decades. They've tried everything, but the disturbances only seem to be getting worse." Ross nodded, a determined look in his eyes. "We'll head out first thing in the morning." As the sun set, casting the city in a warm, orange glow, Ross and Maya looked out of their office window, ready for their next adventure. They had come a long way from their days at the Girard Avenue facility, but their mission remained the same: to bring peace to restless spirits and bridge the gap between the living and the departed. And as they embarked on this new journey, they knew that they were just getting started. If you have enjoyed our paranormal scary story about the activities haunting the public storage facility, please visit us at Paranormal Untold Stories. Come to listen to more of our scary stories collection. Paranormal Untold Stories encourages you to contact us if you have your own untold story that you would like our professionals team to put online as a scary story. Thank you. Please follow our YouTube channel, Paranormal Untold Stories, and encourage others to do the same. Paranormal Untold Stories.